out and came back in.
Delia, can I go out your live?
I see the,
Okay, so we are
okay,
live. Fabulous. Okay, good morning. This is Natural Resources and Energy. It is February 18th, 10:30, and well, a little after actually. But we are joined today by Andrea Cohen from Vermont Electric Co-op, and love to do just like a quick round of introductions, and then we'll turn it over to you to tell us about your thoughts. So Senator Hardy.
Hi, I'm Senator Ruth Hardy from the Aston District.
Terry Williams from the Rutland District.
And Watson from Washington District.
Beth Bongartz from the Bennington Senate District. Scott back down there.
Great. Thank you for having us in today. For the record, my name is Andrea Cohen. I'm with Vermont Electric Cooperative. We haven't been here yet this session, so jumping right in, few facts about VEC, because there's some new members that might not have met us before. We cover the service territory on the northern part of the state. We're the second largest distribution utility in the state. We have 33,000 members, we call them, because we're a co-op, and they across 8 counties actually, and 75 towns. We were established in 1938, and we're a nonprofit cooperative governance model. Some interesting demographics about our members: about half of our members are on fixed incomes. A much older demographic. 53% are actually age 65 and older. So as you might imagine, we're always laser focused on affordability as a very important priority. I'm not sure if you're aware of the energy burden report that the EIC does, but unfortunately in that report, of the top 11 towns that have the highest energy burden, we have 7 in our service territory. So just to put a point on that some more. That said, we don't want you to not understand that we're also highly innovative and highly effective. Just because we're low income doesn't mean we're not doing a great job and doing innovative work. And we're very proud of the work we get done. To S65, my disclaimer is I haven't had a lot of time with it. Yesterday was a holiday. I didn't get to talk to everybody on my team. So I might come back and I might follow up with some other comments, but I do want to hit some high level points on the bill. We have no objection at all to looking at the evolution of the efficiency utility. I think it's been 35 years maybe-ish that we established that, and there's been a lot of good work accomplished to date, but things are very different now than they were 35 years ago. The market has caught up, the utilities are in a whole different space, and so and we have new challenges with the carbon work that we're trying to work on, right? So to emphasize, this is a major policy evolution that you're anticipating in this bill. And we really think it requires a lot of thoughtful consideration and thorough review by all the interested stakeholders. So I'm not sure you're aware of all the work that the utilities are doing in this space already. So we'll share some of that today. It can have considerable consequences. And so we just want you to understand, maybe some of the things to be looking out for. So the big important questions: we have new things we want to do in the carbon reduction space as a policy in the state. Who should do this work? Really important, to identify who should be responsible, and even as importantly, if not more so, who should pay for this work. So we have things to do: who should do it, who should pay for it. I will talk to some of the things in the bill, the beneficial electrification, what we often refer to as Tier 3. You might not be aware that utilities already have a mandate for the renewable energy standard to do this work. And we at VEC are currently, and we're kind of knocking it out of the park, and we're doing a really good job of this work. One of the good things about Tier 3 is it allows the different utilities to do customizable types of approaches depending on their service territory. So I'll often say what BED does in Burlington is really different than what VEC does in the northern part of the state to meet the same carbon reduction requirements. So we kind of really like Tier 3 because it allows us to be innovative and meet the needs of our members in a way that is relevant for them. So for example, in BBC service territory, we do a lot of work with like sugar makers, gravel pit folks, who have been using fossil fuel generators all these years to fuel their operations. And we're like, that's not great for carbon, and it's not great for the system. So we work with them to like help finance line extensions. So we're getting electricity to them so they can convert to cleaner carbon-free fuels to do the work that they're already doing, and it's a win-win all around. So that's the kind of things we do at BBC. BD, as I'm sure you've heard, they'll do things like multi-family charging stations. That's not as important in our service territory, right? So we each do territory in a way that really makes sense. In the bill that you have, and I'll point back to this a few times, beneficial electrification, storage, flexible load management are all identified as things that would be sent to the efficiency utility in place of the language and in place of us doing that work. That is transformative, not necessarily a good idea in our opinion, both for the beneficial electrification work as well as, and I'll talk a little bit about storage and demand work. One of the things in those spaces, beneficial electrification, storage, load management, the distribution utility has an incentive to do that work and to do it really well. Beneficial electrification means we have more sales, candidly. That's good because especially in a low income service territory, it means we can spread the costs around more people. It helps everybody, it helps the whole membership when we can do that. And so we have an incentive to do it, do it well, do it cost effective. We would not be supportive of just saying, let somebody else do that work. Each utility might have a different approach. If you're an efficiency utility as well as a distribution utility like Burlington Electric, they're a totally different animal. So I would say, everything I'm saying has nothing to do with them, but a distribution utility that is not an efficiency utility. Storage and demand management. We also don't support the delegation and the funding, and I'll talk more about funding to the efficiency utility to do that work. We candidly have the experience and the expertise in our system. And we actually think the electric utility money, if we're going to use it for these kinds of purposes, we'd rather have the money, candidly. Like we collect and remit $5 million a year over to the efficiency utility. If we've decided, well, we should use that money for these kinds of things, we would argue, give us a chance to use that money for these projects. We're already having to fund it through ratepayers. Why not use that fund? So I know that is, kind of causing a little shift in the matrix to start talking that way, but it really is something that comes up with my board and our senior leader discussions. They're like, why would we collect money, send it there to do the work that we're already doing? Like, how about we keep it and do the work that we're already doing? And some of the work in the storage and the demand management space is we're recognized by, there's like 800 utility co-op utilities in the state, in the country, and we're recognized as one of the most innovative, forward-thinking utilities in this space. And I don't know how much time I have, but we can always come back and really dive into, like I could bring our innovation leader in, but we're doing device management programs with EV chargers, we're doing bring your own battery programs, we're working with large users of fossil fuels to convert, like we had a project with JP where we're doing this dynamic electrification where we're saving 500,000 gallons of propane a year by helping convert them to electric use for some of their water park and their one of their facilities. So, this is what we're doing now. Why do we flex load? You might have heard a little bit already about there's peak times, and that is when electricity is the most expensive and it's also the dirtiest. And that's typically between 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. at night. That's when people come home, they plug their their car in and they're doing laundry and they're using appliances and things. We have a lot of programs to help shift that load to later in the evening or overnight. So I'm sure you've heard a little bit about that. But so we have a vehicle charger program, a telematics program that we're piloting now that speaks directly to the vehicle. It's like not even going through the charger, it goes right to the vehicle. It says wait till 9 o'clock. And these are all opt-in programs and people can opt out if they need to charge their car, no problem. But this is helping us reduce peak load and, something that frankly, distribution utilities are the only ones that can do. That's not something we feel like another entity, like, we're in the system, we know our system, we know what needs to happen. We would not be, supportive of delegating that to another outside entity. We have 2 community scale battery projects we could come back and talk about, where our members have already made these investments. So in the time I have left, let's just talk, put a point on paying for carbon reduction. Using the electric efficiency dollars, we really feel like we should be ramping down that fee. We want people to convert to electrification because it's cleaner. Yet people have to pay a fee, the efficiency fee on all the electricity they use. I personally am 100% electric house and driving and all this stuff. I spend a lot of money, but the amount of money I'm spending every month is increasing because I'm using more electricity, and that's how we've set it up. Should we keep doing that? I know there's not appetite necessarily this year to do a fossil fuel fee, or maybe there is, I don't know, that's. But if we could, wave our magic wand, we'd say ramp down the electric fees and ramp up the other fees for folks that are using fossil fuels. And it could be revenue neutral, but it's sending the right price signal. We have to stop sending the wrong price signal for electric use. If we want people to convert to electricity, we need to make it cost effective to do so. And our job is we'll keep the lights on and we'll do all that part, but there's only so much we could do with rates, and we're going for our 3rd rate increase. Again, anything you can do to help us with that, we really appreciate. There's a lot I can talk about in terms of paying for carbon, but sending the right price signal would be really helpful. So, in sum, we're not, we like to come in and be in support of things as much as possible, but at this point, we'd like to say we'd love to work with you on this bill. The way it's drafted right now is not something we can support, both for who does the work and how we're paying. So. Thank you for the
I
time.
have to ask you one question.
Yes.
So there, I didn't mention this, earlier, but, there is, part of the bill is about setting aside, funding from Efficiency Vermont's, budget specifically for, low income work. Do you have any thoughts or comments about that? Because you brought up the energy burden aspect, and
Yeah.
and that's absolutely a concern as well. And so how can we,
Yeah.
anyway, I wonder if that would potentially disproportionately benefit folks in your territory, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
The energy equity work is really important. We start by saying the best thing you could do to support, these are all regressive, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The best thing we can do is keep rates as low as possible. That's where we always start. So when there's proposals with things that are gonna add admin costs, we're always like, that's not gonna help. You've tasked the PUC to do a low income rate study, and that's coming back next December. We think a comprehensive approach is the way to go, so not this individual fee at the end of the day, we don't wanna spend a lot of money on admin for all these different fees and eligibilities and but we do need to focus on the affordability part for everything we're charging people. So we would recommend maybe roll something into that report that you're already getting back, because I saw the part about the differential fee for energy efficiency, and I'm like, no, please, our bills are incredibly complicated already.
Yeah.
I don't know people's income, and I don't wanna know, candidly, so. If we wanna provide relief to ratepayers that can qualify, there's a lot of ways to efficiently do that. That's not each individual charge.
Fair enough. Okay,
All right.
any other
Happy to
questions
come
at
back.
this point? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, oh, yes, go ahead.
I saw that you had written testimony, but I don't think it's on our website. Are you willing to share it?
I have to clean it up because I was not really working this weekend and I didn't make
Fair,
it.
totally
So
fair.
I will clean it up and then I send it
That would be great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah, for sure. All right, super, and I believe we have Ken Nolan from VIPSA with us virtually. Hello, welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to testify remotely, dealing with some health issues that kept me from driving down. So appreciate your flexibility.
No problem.
Just for the record, my name is Ken Nolan. I'm the General Manager of Vermont Public Power Supply Authority, otherwise known as VEPSA. For a little bit of history, VEPSA was created in 1979 by the legislature. You can find our statute in VSA Title 30, Chapter 84, give you all the details of why we were created and what our authorities are. Short story is we were created to help the small utilities in Vermont reach economies of scale. So a lot of the back office functions you would see in a larger utility, we do on behalf of the smaller utilities. Presently, we're representing 11 of the small municipal utilities. Stowe Electric and Hyde Park are not members. Burlington, who Andrea pointed out, is kind of a unique utility in the state. They're a strategic member of VEPSA. They join our board meetings. We coordinate closely with them. But in the legislature, they tend to speak on their own, and they don't take all the services from us. So I'm speaking today on behalf of the 11 small utilities that are full members. Altogether, those small utilities serve just over 30,000 customers, and they serve all or portions of 50 communities in Vermont. So they're pretty widespread. Most of our membership is along the northern tier in the Northeast Kingdom, Franklin County, but we do have Northfield, Ludlow, and Jacksonville in the southern part of the state. Initially, we were created to do financing of generation projects. But over the 40-year history, we've expanded dramatically in the services we provide. So now we do everything from power supply planning and purchasing, rate cases, regulatory support, legislative support. We do the renewable energy standard compliance on behalf of all of our members. There's actually a section in that part of statute that allows us to comply in the aggregate. So behind the screen, we run the programs independently for all 11 utilities. But when we report to the Public Utility Commission, it's done as a composite. So those utilities can work together and share resources. Our members tend to go by pretty solid principles of operation. Affordability is front and center all the time, every day. Reliability, obviously, they want to make sure the lights stay on and customers are well served. Sustainability, and just as importantly, keeping decisions locally. They're very concerned about local control and having their residents and customers be able to decide their future. With that, I'll turn to the bill here at 65. I'm going to be echoing a lot of the comments that Andrea made. I think we're pretty closely aligned on our view of the bill and what we'd like to see. I'll start by saying we also are very supportive of the state's efforts for greenhouse gas reductions and are very open to looking at how the efficiency utilities can play a role there as you try to transition them to the future. We do, though, see this bill creating some ambiguity and confusion between the EEU's roles and the distribution utilities. And we would urge you to take your time and make sure you understand the unintended consequences that could happen as a result of this, and really think through what the roles and responsibilities should be. Related to Tier 3 of the renewable energy standard, as Andrea described, all of the distribution utilities in Vermont have obligations under the renewable energy standard to promote fossil fuel reduction. We are already running substantial rebate programs for electric vehicles, heat pumps, lawnmowers, forklifts, golf carts, pretty much anything that we can move folks from fossil fuel use to electricity, we're offering rebates for. We actually, VEPS itself, worked with Senator Sanders back in 2022 to get a $1 million earmark or congressionally directed spending allocation specifically to help do commercial and industrial fossil fuel conversion under Tier 3, because we were finding to get businesses to institute these conversions, they were looking for incentives of $50,000, $100,000 of rebates. And even then, when we committed to provide that money, we often ran into capital constraints where the business couldn't bring their own capital to bear. So the senator was able to help us get a revolving loan fund set up that now allows us to give low interest or zero interest loans to businesses and fund 100% of the projects. So we remove the capital constraint. And we're just starting that. We did our first project with Darnto Sox in Northfield, and we're looking for other businesses to roll that out at the same time. There's already tension between the utilities doing Tier 3 work and the efficiency utility doing work with its TEPF funds, where they're also trying to do carbon reductions. And we have to share some of those credits that are created. So if you're not aware, the utilities have a regulatory obligation, and if we don't meet the obligation, there are financial penalties attached with not meeting that standard. So a bill which encourages or requires the efficiency utility to become more involved in carbon reductions actually increases the tensions that would be there and potentially puts the utilities in a place where we have to pay additional money to get customers to work with us, or in a case where the efficiency utility is taking more of that work, we potentially could be faced with having to make an alternative compliance payment, which is essentially a penalty fee paid to the state. We're very concerned that the bill could push us toward that direction. I don't think we're necessarily completely aligned with Vermont Electric Co-op on this. I would say we would prefer to see the efficiency charges go down and that money stay with the utilities if possible. We're open to a conversation of having the rebates and the incentives move completely to the efficiency utilities, but we think that should be done in conjunction with either reduction or elimination of the distribution utility requirement under Tier 3 of the RES. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us to have multiple entities trying to promote the same incentives with customers and increase costs and create confusion. It could be more effective to take our money we're spending on Tier 3 today and allow us to redirect that money toward grid upgrades that would be needed to promote the electrification. So we would want to see the conversation there, really dive in and talk about where's the split and who's the best entity to be providing these consumer incentives. We don't think it makes sense for both entities to be doing that. On demand management, active demand management, as it's described in the bill, we agree with Vermont Electric Co-op. That's a utility function. Has serious cost implications for utilities, and a lot of the costs are essentially a zero-sum game. So if one utility reduces its peak, the costs aren't reduced, they just shift to another utility. So you could easily find yourself in a situation where activities happening with one utility are actually increasing costs for other Vermont consumers. So we agree that with Vermont Electric Co-op that the distribution utilities are best placed to manage those demand management activities, to understand how they're going to work with their customers, and to control the cost structure. We would not support that function moving to Efficiency Vermont or the efficiency utilities. I noticed in the bill, and I agree, would also say, we've had essentially 2 days with this bill, trying to understand it. So this is a fairly high level response, but two other things we noticed are the deleted language in the bill that's cleaning up some of the remnants left over when the additions were made. We think two things were deleted that really shouldn't be. There was a reference to least cost planning that was removed. Even if you're trying to bring carbon effects into the least cost planning process, when you do a societal economic analysis, that can easily pull in the carbon benefits. But when we're focused so heavily on affordability, we don't think it's appropriate to just not take away least cost planning as a whole. We should be looking instead to modify the way we're doing least cost planning to include the impacts of carbon emissions. It's still striving to do the least cost activities to the extent we can. The other thing that was a little bit of a surprise is the elimination of a requirement for the DUs and the efficiency utilities to coordinate with each other. There's a very clear requirement in Tier 3 for the distribution utilities to coordinate with the efficiency utility. There was language in the efficiency utilities appointment section of the statute that required them to coordinate with the distribution utilities. That language was removed in S65. We think it should be inserted. That with the dynamic nature of the industry right now, it's more important than ever that all of the utilities coordinate together. In any place we can insert those and make a requirement, we think is appropriate.
Sorry if to interrupt, we have a question in the room.
Thanks, Ken. This is Senator Hardy. Can you tell me, I found the first thing in the bill that you were concerned about, the deleting. What is the second, where is the second one in the bill? The first one is on the middle of page 7.
Yeah.
Lines 15 and 14. Can you tell me where the second one is? Just so I can.
It may take me a couple of minutes to pull it up. I'm happy to do so.
Okay.
Could you tell me the first one?
The first one was on page 7.
Yep.
Lines 13 and 14.
Yep. Okay. Oh yeah, there is.
Stuff that's deleted.
Mhm.
But the second one I didn't catch, where I couldn't find it where it was. Coordination. Is it page 11?
My apologies.
No, that's okay. I think it's page 11, lines 4 and 5, but I just want to, does that sound right?
Correct. Yes, that's
Okay,
it.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd stop there. We're more than happy and willing to participate in the conversation and try to make the bill better, to define kind of the boundaries between the distribution utilities and the efficiency utilities. But we do think there needs to be a bright line, and not a lot of ambiguity in where different activities lay between those folks. I'll stop there and happy to answer questions.
Super. Any questions for Ken? Mr. Nolan? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understand your sort of overall message. Because a lot of this is fairly new to me, but what I'm hearing is that the way the bill is currently structured, it would make it harder for electric distribution utilities to meet the requirements of Tier 3, because a lot of that work would be shifted to the efficiency utility to do. And therefore, you wouldn't be able to meet those requirements, and you would literally have to pay more in order to offset not meeting those requirements. Is that basically what, did I understand that correctly?
I think there's two layers to my comments.
Okay.
The first is the bill shifts a lot of what is right now distribution utility functions to the efficiency utilities.
Yep,
We don't necessarily agree that it's appropriate to move all of those functions out of the utility purview. So that's kind of the high level. We need to be
Yep.
really careful when you start taking away distribution utility functions that it's the right thing to do. We think there are several transfers that are not appropriate. If you go to the premise that the efficiency utilities should be the ones encouraging consumers to reduce carbon emissions, then you run into this tension between utilities and efficiency utilities because you basically have set up two separate entities trying to do the same thing. And on our side, on the distribution utility side, there are literally financial penalties if we don't meet the targets. So you're creating or increasing the likelihood that the utilities will have to pay those financial penalties.
got it.
So if you're going to move this over to the efficiency utility, you need to do something about the penalties that the utilities would be incurring.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
One further question, so as I understand it, right now, just from the consumer perspective, if there is a homeowner in one of the territories of one of your towns, they may have a rebate or some kind of incentive from the distribution utility from yourself. But let's say we're talking about a heat pump, for example. My understanding is that Efficiency Vermont also has incentives or rebates. So it's the idea that currently people are sort of layering two different rebates on top of each other to help offset these costs.
Yeah, it's to some degree, yes. It's complicated, more complicated than that, in that most of the carbon reduction or fossil fuel reduction in rebate is coming from the distribution utility. And then Efficiency Vermont is also giving rebates more tied to the efficiency of the product being purchased.
Oh, right.
So they're giving incentives for being efficient, and we're giving incentives for the carbon reduction. But we end up having to coordinate with Efficiency Vermont so that there's only one rebate. So right now, what's happening on the heat pumps in particular is Efficiency Vermont is giving a rebate, what they call midstream. It's going to the installer or the seller of the device. Efficiency Vermont's giving them a rebate that includes both their own incentive and the distribution utility incentive, at least for the VEPSA members, and then billing us on the back end for the amount that they gave. So to the customer, it looks like one rebate, which is actually two pots of money coming into it.
Okay, that's helpful to know that at least for the customer, it doesn't look like there's two things they have to do. It's all sort of together in one. But that's good to know. It's interesting that it is that complicated. So appreciate what you have to say. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Nolan? Okay, thank you so much. Really appreciate both you and Ms. Cohen coming in, and look forward to working together on this. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. So thanks, team. We are going to shift now to chloride. We did have legislative counsel in here. I'd love to know that we were going to probably go till about 11:10 with this testimony, and that is pretty accurate. So hopefully he is not far away at this moment. He's just outside. Hopefully he'll pop back in. Otherwise, maybe we should take a very brief break. Get our ledge counsel in here. Well, let's plan to do that. Let's take a very, very quick break.
Sure.
Did you hear that?
I don't know.
Yeah, I did hear that. It's just gonna take me a minute to shut the sound off. Here we go.
Okay. I want to check to see, did you get an email from Jared Carpenter with his suggested language?
Did I, on S65?
No, sorry, chloride.
I don't know.
Okay, that's okay.
Scheduled. I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Okay, having trouble unmuting. Can you step up to the iPad, Ann, and see if you can unmute it there?
There we go.
Okay, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so
But we are live still, right?
Yeah, no, yes, we are live now.
Hey, we are live. Okay, and we're ready to.
Just make sure you see the live thing up in the corner, because I can't see that from here.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
there.
we can see it.
Great,
Okay.
you're all set.
All right, super. So we're just, so the natural resources and energy come back from a quick break. And we're looking at a new draft of, S29. Do you want to join us? And yeah, so we have version 2.2 that we're looking at now. And there are some changes that have been made. I feel like it probably makes sense for us to just walk through some of the changes. And I know we have at least one other proposed change that we can talk about. When we get there, so yeah.
Should I look at all of the changes that you've made? Because remember, you went through halfway and marked it up. And then went through the rest and marked it up. I never really went through a summary of the changes that were made before.
Thank you.
This the yellow highlights include
Yeah.
all of your changes.
Mhm.
Can we go through all?
Yeah, sure. And I'm gonna pass out an email from Mr. Carpenter that had some further change suggestions. So just so you have it as well, hard copy. There you go. Okay.
So, just going on changes, page 2. Lines 5 through 6 in the definition of salt. There was that request to clarify that it was used for the purpose of de-icing or anti-icing, just as salt alternative has that same language. Moving down on page 2, line 10 through 13, there was a question of what a transportation infrastructure construction project is. I believe it was AOT provided a definition. It's a project that involves the construction of roadways, parking lots, sidewalks, or other construction activities at transportation facilities or within transportation rights of way. Then moving on to the next line, the program had a couple of different names in it. So this is to provide consistency of what the program is going to be called. It's the fluoride contamination reduction program. That had already been used, but previously this title was salt application program. And so this is for consistency on the use of terms. You'll see that same language, page 2, line 17, fluoride contamination reduction program. On page 2, line 9 through 20, in the requirements that A&R is establishing, they are going to include requirements for certification of a master commercial salt applicator. And then on page 2, lines 20 and 21, the language originally required this program to be implemented through a third-party contractor. This allows A&R to elect to implement with state agency staff or through a competitively selected third party for some combination. Moving down page 3, line 6, it's just using the term program instead of the entire title. Moving down further, there's a breakout of language. Hold on a second, let me just. Okay. There had been a previous subdivision 3 that was combined into subdivision 2, so that they will establish standards for when and how salt and salt alternatives are applied in order to prevent them from entering waters, including alternatives that are cost effective and less harmful to water quality, while maintaining safety, and also whether and how to implement equipment to calibrate, monitor, or meter application of salt for salt alternatives. But you wanted the specific term calibrate to be included.
I apologize. I have lost where you.
Page 3,
Okay.
line 18.
Okay, I was thinking we were further, and that's why I couldn't find you. Okay, sorry. What did I have to?
Okay, page 3, line 21. You wanted a record keeping requirements for the certified applicators to include records of training. And on page 4, lines 4 through 5, you wanted the agency to create and circulate a model form for record keeping and reporting of the information required. And then on page 4, line 9 through 10, you wanted to establish a testing requirement for applicators to complete prior to receiving an initial certification. If you heard testimony from the add-on program on that. On page 4, line 21, at your last meeting, the Agency of Transportation asked to be removed from consultation under this section. And they were. Then several changes through the next few lines, page 5, line 2 and 3. There was a requirement to report the amount of salt applied annually, and it was from 2010 to 2020, I believe. And now you would have an estimate because you were asking how are they going to figure that out, and you changed the time frame from to 2015 to 2025. We also, as part of that estimate, added the private contractors for summer dust suppression as a part of the data that needs to be collected and estimated. Then page 5, line 8 through 10, this may be some of the new language that Jared discussed with the agency about determining the amount of salt annually applied in the state using a public accounting method established by the secretary to assess salt purchases and application within Vermont. There was a previous subdivision which required A&R to develop a database of salt application, and that was struck at the recommendation of the agency. And then page 5, line 14, it previously had a report to the General Assembly. You wanted a specific relevant committees reference, so it goes to you, transportation, house environment, and house transportation. Moving on to page 6. This was some formatting or structural changes. There was, when introduced, it was just one large paragraph and we kind of got lost in it. So on page 6, line 3, there's that except for language in subdivision 2. Remember, this is the section that provides that limited liability to certified applicators as long as they are the liability is caused by snow or ice and they were applying according to the PMPs for certification. But page 6, line 14, that protection does not apply when they are grossly negligent or reckless. So that was added as a new subdivision. And then subdivision 3 was also added for just foundational structure. Page 7, there used to be a rebuttable presumption for the certified applicators from all of the requirements of chapter 47, which is all of the water quality requirements. So instead of it just being a rebuttable presumption for all of chapter 47, it's a rebuttable presumption for 10 VSA 1263, which is a discharge permit requirement, and 10 VSA 1264, which is stormwater management requirements. So how is this going to work? If you are certified and you are applying according to the DMPs and there is some runoff that goes into the water, maybe it goes into the water through a pipe, you are presumed not to need a discharge permit because you are applying according to what A&R told you how to do. Yeah. Similarly, if you are applying and it runs off the pervious surface and then enters the water through stormwater, you're not going to be required to be caught up in stormwater management or stormwater permitting because of that. You're doing what A&R required you to do. Now, this doesn't exempt municipalities that already are subject to the MS4 permit from saying, oh, no, I don't have to comply with the MS4 anymore because my applicators are certified. There is so much more under the MS4 permit that municipalities have to do other than just manage their salt application. They have to clean out their catch basins, they have to do street sweeping, they have to do kind of coordinated education and training. It's like this doesn't exempt them from.
There's a further question on that. Because I'm thinking about the implementation plan that might be associated with a salt related TMDL. You know, I can imagine that in those kinds of locations, we might want people to do something a little bit different, or they might be directed to do something a little bit different. Do you think this would exempt them from the TMDL related directive?
Somebody could make that argument. I don't think it would be a successful argument, but somebody could make that argument. And I can clarify.
I wonder, yeah, I'm wondering if we can add something like with the exception of, implementation of a TMDL plan. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Should I move on?
Yeah, unless there's other questions. Okay.
I,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I'm just trying to follow the letters. I had on one of mine that I just crossed out one of the paragraphs. Is there did we get rid of one of the paragraphs in this part?
Not in this part, not yet.
Okay.
You expanded some of them, which created some redesignation, but, oh, actually, there had been something that was struck,
Oh, yeah, that should not have been struck.
that there was something that was struck, hold on a second. And what's interesting,
We're on page 7.
oh, you took out enforcement.
That's what I thought. Okay, yeah.
You
Yeah.
took out the requirement that if they violated anything, that they would be subject to general enforcement. And instead, they lose their certification if they're not compliant.
And if they're not certified, then they don't get any of these
They
benefits.
don't
They
get
don't get the
any
benefits,
protection,
right?
and that's voluntary. Although across the hall, Senator Brennan, what happens if the property owners, the mall owners, the grocery store owners start requiring their applicators to be certified? And you actually heard from New Hampshire that that's happening because the insurers are requiring it. Because why wouldn't an insurer require it? If they get released from liability,
Yeah.
why wouldn't the insurer require it? And I did discuss that dynamic with the committee across the hall, and you might hear something from someone about that.
Okay.
So a voluntary program indirectly becomes a
Right,
required.
it's no longer, it's not a state mandatory
Yeah.
program, but it's a program that becomes mandatory through the requirements of you wanting to keep the business of someone whose insurer is required.
Right. Because it reduces liability for the insurance as well.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Moving down on page 7.
Actually, before we leave that part, I'm wondering if we need to be clear, because we've removed the enforcement part. It's great. I'm wondering if we need to be clear that the consequences are that the certification is lost, or is that?
Right on page 7, line 7 through 10.
Oh, okay.
The secretary may revoke a certification.
Okay,
for violation of the requirements of the subject of the rules for the provisions of certification.
perfect, it's right there, awesome, thank you.
On page 7, lines 11 through 18, this is just tweaking some of the record keeping requirements about how they shall keep a record. You had previously wanted a written record, but you heard, especially from that one case in New Hampshire, that they had electronic records. So it's just a record instead of a written record. Then on page 7, line 17, you asked what the statute of limitations was for a slip and fall tort claim in 3 years. So that's how long that they will be keeping. They were retained by the applicator for a period of 3 years.
Great. Perfect, thank you.
On page 7, line 19, this is the storage requirements. You had a requirement that A&R would consult with AOT, but as AOT pointed out, they are actually subject to the requirements of this to cover salt sheds and have best management practices for management of safe and environmentally on salt storage facilities. And they asked you to remove it, and you thought it was reasonable not to have consultation with somebody that was also regulated. Page 8, lines 6 through 11. The honor before was just the editors I had by 2030 and by 2035. They hate that. They want honor before. And then lines 10 and 11, there had been a provision regarding to the funds that were going to be used, and that the covering was going to be eligible for state funding, but there wasn't really any directive where that funding was coming from, how it was going to be provided, what priorities, etc. So you are now requiring them to identify funds that may be used to grant to facilities subject to the cover requirements. These two subdivisions, pages 8, 6 through 11, were Senator Westman, Chair Westman's biggest concerns. He said in one of his towns, Elmore, it took them 15 years to raise the money to cover their salt pile. And he's concerned about the small towns, the other small towns in this district that may not have the funds to do salt covering, especially by 2030 if they're within 100 yards of a surface water or drinking water source. But he's curious about changing the timeline, especially for small municipalities, and wants some priority built into any funding. Well, first he wants to know what funding will be available, and then priority built into it for smaller municipalities. So that was definitely the biggest issue of discussion across the way.
That's good to know.
Section 2. There's nothing changing in section 2, but this was that question that you asked me to flag where monitoring should take place when a pollutant enters the water in the mixing zone, which may be away from where it first enters or the point where it first enters. So you just asked me to flag that. I'm flagging it again for you.
And
You never sort of.
yeah, is that on page 9?
It's on page 9 at the bottom of the page, but
Yes.
it is also on page 10 going on to page 11.
Right.
Page 9 is really about any monitoring for any contaminant, and page 10 going on to 11 is monitoring for fluoride when there's been a monitoring that shows that there's increased levels of fluoride in that water. But it's the same concept. Where do you monitor compliance?
This is what the language that Jared sent, yes, his attempt at it.
And
Yeah.
I haven't seen this.
You can have that.
Yeah, it was pretty recent.
Okay.
So as of, like, if we did not include C at all, in this language, then DEC would continue to just measure at the point of dilution or mixing, is that?
Right, and then they would measure in a distance away from the immediate introduction of the contaminant. They do allow for what they call the mixing zone and some dilution. But it's really a debate about whether dilution is something that should be considered in monitoring water quality, or if dilution is not the solution, that's the catchphrase that certain advocates use. And, you know, typically the agency does allow for some mixing because honestly, but there's contaminants that go into the water all the time, but with dilution far enough away, limited amount of the contaminant, they don't impair the water. They don't create issues with the designated uses, and so doesn't. And remember, that's what a TMDL is. A TMDL is the maximum amount of that pollutant that you can let into the water, and it doesn't impair the water. It's not turning the spigot off, it's like turning the spigot down. And so the question is, do you measure right where the spigot, where it comes out of the spigot, or do you allow it to collect in the basin first and then measure it? And so that I don't have, it's an interesting policy discussion for someone like me. I don't have a solution for it.
Curious if you all have thoughts, about what you would prefer to do with this. I have some thoughts as well, but yeah.
Your thoughts, Terry, for Senator?
I guess it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. You can make it anything you want it to be. It is what it is. I mean, if you go further away from the point of entry into the water, it's obviously not going to be as, critical.
Yeah.
It seems to me that, you know, that's one of the qualities of water is that things dilute in it, and that sometimes means that things that go into the water are not such a big deal, because there's so much water and so little of whatever this substance is. And that's the same with air, things dilute in the air and soil, all these things. So I understand why they use the dilution. And that if they see that, I guess what I would try to, I would, seems to me like what the goal should be is if they're seeing rising levels of salt in the water and they're testing the dilution point and they're seeing rising levels, then the question should be, where's that salt coming from? And then they need to identify where the source is, and maybe it's because there's a pipe coming from a salt shed that's going into a river. And then they're like, oh, that's where it's coming from, we gotta turn off that pipe. And then they test the water more and see if it's better. But just, of course, the levels are gonna be really high at the point where the pipe goes in, because that's where the salt is. So I guess I think measuring the dilution point is more scientifically accurate. And if there's some way we could add some language of, if the levels are getting higher, you need to identify where it's coming from, kind of thing, I don't know.
Yeah, so that's sort of where my thinking is going as well, in terms of, particularly because I think this new language that we have might not mean that the DEC has to measure all of the pipes, you know what I mean? 'Cause, as it is, it seems like the assessment we received was that, they would have to do a lot of checking, and that could be quite onerous, and
Yeah.
but it is worth doing if it's in a place that you're trying to reduce the salts. Which to me makes it feel like that doing the point source checks makes more sense. In a TMDL kind of situation, or if it's at risk of becoming a
Yeah.
TMDL. And because otherwise it just makes all of the data higher and worse when, you know, that for the purposes of, you know, the aquatic biota, it might be okay at the dilution point.
Well, let's look at section 4,
Oh,
Oh, okay, all right,
because that's effectively what section 4 does.
okay,
When a state water segment is identified as contaminated by chloride levels that exceed the chronic or acute standards established by EPA, ANR shall begin regular monitoring of chloride levels in that water segment and investigate potential acute and diffuse contamination sources. And if the source that is causing chloride contamination levels that exceed EPA chronic or acute is found, ANR shall require monitoring physical discharge point of water.
perfect.
see, so, yeah, oh,
So if they're doing it anyway,
yeah.
which they are,
Mhm.
well, you just add another test to see if we got additional chlorine contamination. And if you find it, then we'll find the source.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like this section 4
So
does what we were.
Yeah, what we were just
what we
talking
were
about.
just- yeah, so, I'm sorry.
No.
So I'm okay with taking out C,
Yeah.
for now, particularly because, it makes sense to do more testing where there is and, you know, chasing down culprits, I guess, in places where there's concern.
So you would actually take out that entire section,
Oh, all of section 2?
right? Because all of the only other changes in there are technical changes to the citations. So there's no substantive change, and so there'd be no section 2.
Oh,
You didn't wanna just do the technical changes because we're here? No, okay, all right.
Really?
Okay, all right, all right. Okay then.
It's also, I have a personal preference of referencing the public law. Because people call it the Clean Water Act. But the real name of the law is the Federal Water Pollution Control Act. And that's what public law. And 92-500 is the Clean Water Act amendments to, I'm just going way down into that way. I'm kind of like the old school.
Okay. I support you, and that's fine, let's take out the whole section.
yeah.
Okay.
Makes the bill shorter.
Yes, it does, Senator Williams.
So one thing that I was asked by the 3 contractors I spoke to.
Yeah.
Was, is the agency of transportation gonna be exempt from this? And I mean, it's kind of a broad question, but I said, well, why do you ask? Because, you know, if it's gonna be something that we have to do, then the state should have to do it too. So nobody's saying you have to do. So, but what is the AOT's responsibility for this on covering their salt sheds?
So they already have a plan. They have, this plan was, I think the latest one was 2020, but I'm not really sure. And so it already is about things like how to apply, when to apply best management practices. They've already covered, I think they covered all of their facilities. And so they are already doing what the rest of the bill would require for a private and municipal.
And remember, we got testimony from them.
Yeah.
That, talking about their drivers and how they monitor and calibrate. I love that word, their trucks and everything, so I think the answer to your constituents is they already do it and they're required to do it, and it's just a state
level program instead of a municipal or private program. Would you like to add
Sure.
something since you're here?
Thank you, Mayor Watson. Just point of clarification, 100% of our salt sheds are covered. We have 9 sand piles, and this bill imposes that sand piles be covered as well. And that's a comment I can share with now or later. We have 9 sand piles that are not covered. 1 sand pile is charged or treated with salt to keep it freezing.
So we should clarify whether would catch that as well.
This would catch that for beach grants, Craig Beach Marina Aid State Transportation. It would also catch it for municipalities who have sand piles. It may have unintended consequences as you look at parcel size and you need to build a structure. You might encumber a municipality to purchase land to build a structure. What I'm proposing, if you will, is that language be modified to require sand piles to be contained. So that they don't flow off your sites. And that salt piles be covered. And that sand piles charged or treated with salt be covered.
Where is that in the bill?
PE, line 6 through 9.
Correct.
Oh, because it's a salt and sand. Okay. So we're proposing that that the salt piles be covered, but that the sand piles be contained.
Unless they're treated with salt. If the intent is to manage salt runoff.
Right, and then the salt has to be covered. The mix has to be covered.
Correct.
Sand alone, just contained.
That would be reasonable in terms of protecting service orders, I believe, sand.
Do you want to make that change?
I am game for that change if, but want to check with other folks. Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And what about the timeline? There was a conversation about is 2032 soon? Are you guys?
And beach lands, if we only had to cover our charged salt pile, it's not an issue.
Okay,
We would probably locate that in the existing structure someplace on premise.
So is that gonna be a budgetary issue? So they're gonna increase the amount of money we got allocated for this?
If this language change moves forward, it should not be an issue for the trans.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I do think there's two things to look at. So page 10, line 8 through 12. The agency's gone to report to the jurisdictional committee to recommended the charge for certification of commercial applicators. Remember, you're not sure if they're gonna implement it with agency staff, third party contractor, or combination. So they don't know right now what money that they're gonna need to raise. And so fees are supposed to cover costs of the program. There would be no fee in this bill, it's just a recommendation, you would have to enact a fee at a later date.
So with the idea that it's just they're coming back to recommend a fee, I wonder. I'm just.
It would go to finance.
Yeah, wondering if it would go to finance. It doesn't,
if it does, I can think.
okay, I mean, it's
So
so,
also, and so we would probably talk to the fair, yeah.
oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, do a little both. But hopefully, with the, just referencing it, what's that, oh yes, this is true. But you're not finance, so in case it goes to finance.
Yeah.
But I'll talk to the chair first and see if she even wants it.
Yeah, because the fee report in there.
Well, it's not, we've removed the reference to the fee report specifically, and it's just, just just come back to us.
So the.
Right, I'm not sure if, I guess that Senator Cummings can figure out for herself whether that triggers the flyby or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Then the last change, markup, page 11, section 5. This authorizes a position at the agency in fiscal year 2026 for the program. and then authorizes $125,000 for that position. Remember, there have been previous appropriation of $250,000 for implementation of the program kind of generally. With the concept that they might need that to hire the third-party contractor. You said, well, the third-party contractor is a little premature at this point, since they don't have a fee for the certification. But you did hear from New Hampshire that they need staff to run the program.
They have one, they want two.
Right.
And can't.
And so that's what this would do.
Okay. Any of his?
So by the way, I talked to the private contractor who plows my driveway and told him about the bill. And he was like, I don't use salt, nobody wants me to use salt, so I get it, he was like, I don't do it because I have too many customers who don't want it. And it's a pain and it's expensive, so I was like, I'm fine with it. So that was, I thought, interesting, but the other thing that occurred to me during this extremely snowy weekend where I was running errands on Saturday and everybody's freaking out trying to get ready for the storm, and many of the hardware stores and farm supply stores were out of salt, and people were all like freaking out. I'm wondering, and this might be too late in the game and too complicated, but if there was a way to add a sort of consumer education element to the bill about the use of salt, because I think a lot of people like buy those huge bags of salt and then dump a ton of salt on their driveway. And they really only need what it was like an 8-ounce cup or something like that.
3 inches.
Yeah, so 20 feet. And it just struck me as people were literally like, oh my God, I can't get salt.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I didn't put any salt in my driveway, it was fine, so. I don't know if that's too complicated. I don't want it to cost more money, but just a thought.
Really tough on dogs' paws too.
It is, yes. It really is.
I wonder if it's part of the charge in here that we can. No, I wonder if it's as simple as like adding a line to say, including public outreach or education.
Is your intent to vote this out today? Or-
No,
Okay.
because I think we're already talking about some changes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've got it on the agenda for later in the week, as well. We do have also a raised hand from Senator Bongartz. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Back on page 4, on line 7, starting on line 17, it says, and somebody pointed this out to me the other day, so I hadn't picked up on it, but somebody else did. It says a certified master commercial salt applicator shall ensure that all employees of the business are trained with best management practices. And if that actually could go to somebody who answers the phone or keeps the records, so we probably want to just make clear that it's who applies salt.
That's a good call.
Yep.
Sounds.
So Molly Mahar picked up on that, not me, but I'm now bringing it to our attention. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you feel like you have enough to make that more specific? Okay, cool, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So can we add on the? I guess we might wanna ask A&R if they would even be able to do this, but.
I think a kind of core question for any public outreach is what are you requiring them?
Yeah.
If you're requiring media, they hate that because it's money.
Yeah,
If you're requiring them to develop a document that they post on their website, that's not a problem as much for them. So those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum.
yeah,
So I think that's just something to consider.
right. I mean, a thing posted on our website is probably not that helpful, but at least it's something.
Something people could refer to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just something I was thinking about this weekend, because I think a lot of. I mean, it's probably minor compared to all the road salt, but it's still, it's part of it.
Does as part of the phosphorus reduction program, is there any is there any outreach to, you know, private homeowners, like, hey, like. Think about how much fertilizer you're throwing out there, or do they have any outreach at all?
I have to look at the household fertilizer law. I do think there was.
Yeah, I remember we did something on ag.
And I can look at it, but it was. You can probably find it right now.
I kind of remember that there was some like signage or something.
Well, there was signage at the point of sale.
Yeah.
Do our lakes and ponds, is there any sort of restriction on, you know, you can't apply fertilizer within so many feet of a lake or anything like that, do we?
You can't apply phosphorus fertilizer in the state unless you're if you're agriculture.
Certified.
So the fertilizers that people are buying in hardware stores, they don't have any phosphorus in them?
They're not supposed to.
Okay, well.
Yours will do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, perhaps
Just for
this is,
commercial application.
yeah, perhaps this is something we can just think
Yeah.
about and see if there's a way to work it in for next time. Does that, I mean, I'd love to be, I think it's on the agenda for tomorrow. Because if we can make the changes that we have talked about today, you know, sort of acknowledging that maybe there's some concern about municipal salt sheds, but we can see what the feedback is there. But otherwise, I feel like we're pretty good to go. We're so close. Yeah. Well, Michael, if you see something that might be sort of feasible, that we could model after something else that's low key. Yeah.
So in the statute, it's a retail sale at where the phosphorus is accessible or where it's going to be sold. There must be a clearly visible sign that is at least 8 1/2 inches by 11 inches in size. The state's phosphorus runoff poses a threat to water quality. Then there might be a session law provision that I'm not seeing right now that would be a directive for consumer education. I can look in that like.
I don't know, if we do signs at the point of sale, then it's like every hardware store. Yeah. Do some things, but just, yeah, I'll be annoyed by that, but maybe at least something on the website that people can. Look, salt is not, you don't need that much salt. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that can be circulated, you know, if it just, if it lives somewhere and we can at least point people to it. That could be at least a start. Yeah, Senator.
Questions? Anybody know if there's anything to the salt shortage? I mean, have you heard something to it? Well, I mean,
It's real. Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard there was something about people couldn't get access to, there was a vendor in New York
Oh,
and
yeah.
they couldn't get access
That
to
was
it
the choke point.
because of the storm.
They were holding on to it.
Oh, were they holding on to it? I
Yeah.
thought it was like,
I heard the
like,
price doubled. And then my two contractors said they couldn't get it, because they were on the same buy.
Yeah, everybody's out.
And so who knows why, but
yeah.
There's one thing that the committee across the hall asked, and I did not know the answer to, was there any documented savings in New Hampshire from implementation of the program, meaning water quality improvement or less money spent on water quality because of this program? And
They had anecdotal evidence that it saved money. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I asked them that specific question and they said that they couldn't, they hadn't. The results were sort of inconclusive still, that it hadn't been in effect long enough to have any that they could say this, because of this program, salt has reduced this much.
But we did hear from New York that they had more definitive results.
Yeah.
And the difference to me seemed like the New York programs had more accountability.
Right. And also, we did get testimony about it saving private contractors and municipalities money.
Yeah.
Because salt is expensive.
Well, just to let you know, you might hear a question like that from your colleagues.
Yep. That's fair. Okay. I think we are, before we are totally done, so, you think you can, have this ready for a new draft for tomorrow?
And I'll take out all the highlighting, so you have a relatively clean version that you could vote on if you want to vote on that at that time.
Okay, amazing.